Good morning, everyone. So we're going to carry on. So we have been looking at the Anapanasati Sutta now for a couple of days, which is nice. And hopefully this morning we're going to come to the end of the sutta. And so far we have been looking at the calming down of the mind through 12 steps, ending in the 12th step, which is the vimochayang chittang, which means quite literally liberating the mind. This verb vimochayang is related to the words vimutti and also vimokkha in Pali. So this is the idea of liberation. And as someone pointed out in the questions yesterday, there is a difference between panya vimutti and ceto vimutti. And what we're talking about here is ceto vimutti, the liberation of the mind liberated specifically from the 5 hindrances and also from the 5 kama gunas, the 5 aspects of sensory experience, the 5 senses, if you like. So this is the liberation that we're looking at this point. So at the very last step here, what we are seeing is really the profound samadhi experiences. The jhana, the ceto vimutti, that really refers to the jhanas, and this is what we're seeing here at the very end. And so it's a very profound sutta. Obviously it must be, because the Buddha starts out by saying that this takes you all the way to vidya vimutti, all the way to awakening, so it must be very profound, and we can see all the various profound aspects of the Dhamma are actually included in this. So now that we have achieved a good state of samadhi, a good state of calm of the mind, now the sutta moves over more to what you might call insight. So the 4 aspects that we come to now, there are anicca-nupassi, viraga-nupassi, nirodha-nupassi, and patinissagga-nupassi. And these are all about the idea of impermanence or unreliability, and also about giving up in a certain way. This is what this really is about. And because it is about impermanence, anicca, it is also about the other of the tilakkhana. The tilakkhana, of course, dukkha, and also anatta. In many ways, anicca is the most basic of the tilakkhana, and from the idea of anicca emerges also why things are problematic, why they are suffering, and also why they are non-self. All of these things are related to each other, and that's why this kind of encompasses all the tilakkhana. And the interesting thing here is that this last part of the last 4 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta, they are equivalent to the Dhamma-nupassana of the Satipatthana Sutta. So how is that the case? If you are going to contemplate impermanence of things, how does this relate to the Satipatthana Sutta? And again, one of those interesting things about the Satipatthana Sutta that I mentioned before is that there are certain aspects that are more fundamental than the other aspects. Certain aspects that you see in all the versions of the Satipatthana Sutta. As I mentioned before, there are many versions of this, found in the Abhidhamma, found in the other schools of Buddhism. And when you compare all of them, you find that there are certain things that are more fundamental because they are found everywhere. All schools, all variety of scriptures have these aspects. And these 2 most important aspects are the 5 hindrances, the pancha nivarana, and the 7 factors of awakening, the satta sambojjhanga. These are the 2 things that are the fundamental parts of the Dhamma-nupassana. The Dhamma-nupassana also has many other things. You have the salayatana, the contemplation of the 6 senses. You have the 5 aggregates, the panchakanda, and you also have the 4 noble truths. The chattaro arya satcha are also there, but they are not anywhere near as important as the other ones. Especially the 4 noble truths and the 5 khandhas are not really found anywhere apart, especially for Noble Truths, anywhere apart from the Theravada Satipatthana Sutta. And so how then does the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening, how do they relate to what we're looking at now? And how they relate is that when you look at how this is explained in the Dhammanupassana, the contemplation of the 5 hindrances, if you like, is first of all, you know what the hindrance is. You know when the hindrance is not there, so you know what its presence is, you know what its absence is. You know how it arises. You know how it comes to an end once it has arisen. And you know how it does not arise again in the future. So this has all to do with like the dynamic. Someone used the dynamic samadhi the other day. So this is all about dynamics, right? So the dynamic, the movement of the mind, how things kind of move in the mind. And so this is understanding really conditionality or causality, how things arise, how they don't arise in the future. This is all about causality. And by understanding the causality of the mind, it's similar to understanding impermanence. Things are impermanent precisely because they are caused. When the causes are taken away, then the thing itself ceases. So understanding this causality is very important, because then we can do something about our minds. We can do something about the qualities by putting in the right causes. So this is essentially the same thing as understanding anicca. It's another way of thinking about anicca, viraga, nirodha, all of these things. So this is how Dhammanupassana is similar to the idea of contemplation that we find now, that we see here in the Satipatthana, in the Anapanasati Sutta. Same kind of idea: impermanence, changeability, causality, conditionality. How this world, how the mind works, and how the qualities of the mind arise and how they pass away. And the same thing with the bojjhangas. The bojjhangas are almost like the opposite of the 5 nivaranas, because when 5 nivaranas are strong, the bojjhangas are weak or non-existent. When the nivaranas are weak, then the bojjhangas strengthen. And once the nivaranas are completely absent, you can continue to strengthen the mind even after that, like going into the various jhanas and these kind of things. And so you can strengthen the bojjhangas even further beyond the nivaranas. So the bojjhangas and nivaranas are like, they always go together. If you have a look at the Bojjhanga Samyutta, in the Bojjhanga Samyutta, they often talk about the nivaranas and the bojjhangas together, because they are like opposites of each other, and they kind of work together in this way. So these are the really important qualities that we want to develop, and you can then see how this eventually will lead to profound samadhi and then eventually to awakening itself. The bojjhangas are the factors that lead to awakening. So this is how Satipatthana and Anapanasati work together. I'm not sure if that makes any sense to you, what I just said. If it doesn't, never mind. It's okay. It's not that important. It's just interesting to see how the suttas work together. Now, it's always interesting in a group like this. Some of you are really well versed in the suttas. Some of you know the suttas probably better than I do. And there's always also some people who are not so well versed in the sutta. So there's a variety of. So it's hard to really speak to everyone at all times. But so this now we are dealing with the understanding of impermanence. And these 4 qualities that we're looking at now, anicca, viraga, nirodha, and patinissagga, these are 4 degrees of anicca. All of these things are about impermanence in one way or another. There is the kind of superficial impermanence. It's only called anicca here. It just means that things are always changing. Then there is viraga. Viraga is a more profound aspect of impermanence. Viraga is also a kind of anicca. Viraga means fading away here. It means that impermanence has a certain direction. Things fading away, becoming more, less and less and less. This is impermanence having a direction, if you like. Then, ultimately, because it has a direction, because it is fading away, it comes a point when it ceases completely. This is nirodha, cessation or ending. And then when you see things ceasing, then you understand that actually this is not worth holding on to. Patinisagga, you let go. Yeah, so 4 aspects of impermanence. This is what we are really seeing here. But the impermanence of what exactly? What is it that we are looking at here? And usually when we talk about the tilakkhana, usually in the suttas, very commonly in the suttas, it's about the panchakanda, the 5 aggregates or the 5 aspects of personality, if you like, the one we're translating the khandas. So we can assume that what we are talking about here is understanding the panchakanda. So what does that mean? And when you read the suttas, if you go to the Kanda Samyutta, it has lots of beautiful suttas about the 5 khandas, and we'll come to one of those suttas later on. This is the simile of the lump of foam on the river Ganges. There's a beautiful simile about the 5 khandas. But very often it just says that you contemplate the 5 khandas. You contemplate their existence, what they are. You contemplate their arising and the passing away of the 5 khandas. That's all it says. So how do we do that? How do we contemplate these 5 khandas? What is kind of the technique? It says that you just contemplate it. So what does that mean? Does it mean you just think about it? Or how do we relate to these 5 khandas? And of course, you can think about them. You can understand that one khanda is form. Okay, form is like this, it is impermanent. You can kind of understand it like that. But very often it is too theoretical. It is too abstract. You can't really get a good grip on what it means if you think about it like that. So really what we need to do is we need to understand what the 5 khandas are in our experience. And once you understand what they are in your experience, then it becomes much easier to contemplate them as impermanent, as non-self, and as dukkha. So what are the 5 khandas in our experience? I will just talk about this very briefly before I come back to the Anapanasati Sutta again. What are they in experience? And very often when we talk about the first khanda, the rupa khanda, we translate rupa as form. Yeah, okay, form. Yeah, that's kind of nice. It's a little bit abstract. What exactly does it mean by form? Form is like shape, yeah? A very easy way of thinking about the rupa khanda, which I think is a good translation, is appearance. Yeah, so it is the aggregate of appearance. And appearance is basically when you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, that's me. Yeah? Of course, you're wrong. It's not really you, but that's what you say anyway, right? Everyone says that. That's me in the mirror. Then that is appearance, that is the form khanda. And sometimes you look at yourself in the mirror and think, yeah, that's really me. And other days you look a bit miserable and that's not really me. Yeah, it's kind of either way it is you. Yeah? Either way you are holding on to that appearance. This is how it is like to attach to the form, to have craving for the form, to have a craving for appearance. Once you think of it as appearance, it is very easy to understand what we are looking at. Then the idea of anicca, of these things becomes very obvious what it means. It means that your form, your appearance is always changing. You get older, every day you look a bit different. It is always a movement in a certain way. And that is the rupa khanda. The second khanda is the Vedana khanda. And the Vedana khanda is basically Vedana means something. It can be translated as sensation or feeling. Yeah, and you will all know, well, most of you will know that in the way the suttas talk about this, it is either good, bad, or neutral. Yeah, sukha, dukkha, or adukkama sukha. These are the 3 kinds of feelings or sensations in the suttas. And the Vedana khanda is incredibly interesting and important. And the reason is because Vedana is what gives life meaning. What gives life purpose. It's what gives value to things. Without Vedana, things don't have any value. If there was no Vedana, you wouldn't be doing anything. What keeps you moving, what gets you up out of bed in the morning, what gets you to go to work, what gets you to do all the chores that you have to do, all the activities, what motivates you in anything in life, what motivates you to come here, what motivates me to come here. It's all about Vedana. It's about what we think will be positive, will have a positive effect. We are driven to experience good, pleasurable things, and we are moved away from all the things that are negative, painful, suffering, depression, sadness, breaking a leg, losing your job, dying, old age, etc., etc., etc. We want to move away from that, and we want to move towards the positive feelings, the joy, the happiness, the metta, the compassion, all of these things. This is what drives us as human beings, and because it drives us, it is a very powerful thing to contemplate. If you understand feelings fully, and you see this in the suttas, you become an arahant. Because if you understand that the very thing that drives you, the very thing that gives meaning to life, that is impermanent, that is unreliable, that is uncertain, and the whole thing falls apart. It's like a house of cards, and you pull out the bottom card, everything collapses. And so this is why the Vedana contemplation was often used in the suttas as a foundation for arahantship. You see this in a number of places. You see this, I think, the Diganaka Sutta, where Diganaka, which means long nail, and there's a fellow called Long Nail, probably because he had a long nail. I'm not sure if that was his name or was probably his nickname. And he went to ask questions of the Buddha, and the Venerable Sariputta was fanning the Buddha at the time. And during that conversation, Venerable Sariputta becomes an arahant, and this is precisely based, if I remember correctly, based on the idea of the contemplation of feeling, the unreliability of feeling. So feeling is very, very central to what it means to be a human being. Without feelings, we are nothing. Feelings is what drives us, what kind of makes life meaningful in one way or another. That's why we are Buddhists, because we feel. If we didn't feel, you wouldn't be a Buddhist. So if you don't feel anything, no need to be here. If you don't feel anything, it means you're a zombie, so you're dead already. So if you're dead already, there's no atangika magga for the zombies. They have, I don't know what kind of magga they have, don't have a magga. Zombies are out of the game already. There is a zombie reference in the suttas, in the Vinaya Pitaka. I usually tell this on every retreat. On this retreat, maybe I will restrain myself. We'll see what happens. Do the monks, do they know about the zombie story in the suttas, in the Vinaya Pitaka? Anyway, if you're interested, ask me later, I'll tell you the zombie story. But now, back to the 5 khandas. How many khandas do zombies have? Probably only one khanda, Rupa khanda. Anyway, it's kind of interesting because you see in the world of Hollywood movies they love to have zombie movies, But guess where the zombies occurred first? In Buddhism. I think Hollywood was inspired by Buddhism, right? They kind of read the Vinaya Pitaka, and then they saw zombies and think, okay, let's make a movie about zombies. You must come from somewhere. And one of the fascinating things about the Buddhist suttas is that so many of the things that we take for granted in the modern world, actually, they already existed 2,500 years ago. When we say that there's nothing new under the sun, it's kind of one of those sayings. There's much more truth to that than sometimes we think. And it's kind of fascinating to see how our humanity is the same across time, across cultures, across everything. The differences are very, very small. The differences are very superficial. But the deeper aspects of what it means to be human are exactly the same everywhere. And this has some very profound implications. It has implications, and I will talk about this later on, for how we think about the Buddha, for example. It has very important implications for that we understand the Buddha in the right way. We don't distance ourselves from the Buddha. We don't kind of other the Buddha. I don't know, these days they use the word other in a verbal sense. You other someone, you make them other. In other words, you make a distance between yourself and other people. And what we want to do is to reduce that distance. Especially when it comes to the Buddha, you want to have a sense, a feeling for who the Buddha is as a person. But I'm getting really, really sidetracked now, so I apologize for that. I'm going to go down the wrong path. No, it's not really the wrong path, because that would be the Miccha Atangika Magga. But I don't think it's that. It's just a sidetrack. So back to the Panchakanda again. So Vedana. Next one. Sanya Kanda. Sanya, very important part of the 5 khandas. Sanya is what enables us to make sense of the world. Sanya is what right now what enables you to understand what I say is sanya. What comes out of my mouth is just sound. Yeah, it could be just like the sound of the car in the road. What is the difference between the sound I make and the car in the road? The difference is that you are able somehow to extract meaning from the words that I say here. And it's almost miraculous when you think about it. How can these sounds that enter your ear have so much meaning here? How can they actually convey all of these things? That is what sanya does. So sanya is something very powerful, and it enables us to make sense of the world. When you look right now at this hall, you look out, you see everyone here. You see this beautiful hall around you. You see the beautiful, beautiful green trees outside. I'm really glad I came to Sri Lanka to see so much green. This is actually one of the things I'm really glad about, because it's very, very green compared to Perth. If you like green, never come to Perth. No, come in the winter time, yeah? Actually, it's going to be hard if you come in the winter, because if you are Sri Lankan background, you're going to be very cold in the winter. If you are Norwegian, it's still hot in the winter, but if you are Sri Lankan, it's too cold. But it's all perceptions. Cold, heat, greenery outside, the hall, the people. If you didn't have perception, it would just merge into this kind of mass of colors and nothing else really. You couldn't make any sense of it. So perception is how we make sense of things. This is how we also label things. Yeah, friends and enemies and political parties and religions and all of these things come from perception. Almost everything in the world is somehow labeled through perception. Perception is like, another way of thinking about it, it's like a label or a making sense of things. It's a very, very broad category. And of course, we attach to this a lot. Then you have the last two categories. The first one is the Sankhara Kanda. And Sankhara in the Suttas has a number of different meanings, but the basic idea of Sankhara is the idea of the will, of the volition, the thing that drives you inside, the doer, the agency inside. So whenever you do anything, it is the will that makes you do that. It is Sankhara that moves you. So Sankhara is this agency. In the five khandas, independent origination, Sankhara is the will. It's a very, very important part of being a human being. People often, they identify with the will. You are the doer. If you are a creative person, and we are all creative people because we all create something. If you go to work, you create that work. If you are an artist, we call those creative people, but everyone is really an artist in one way or another. And that joy of creation comes from the joy of attaching to sankharas. We are the doers in our life. We do things. And that doing can take many forms. It can take, if you even just giving a Dhamma talk is like a doing, and if delighting in that is also a kind of sankhara, delighting in sankharas. So this is a very profound thing, and we shall see soon how you can kind of start to understand the idea of sankharas. And the last one, which is the most profound of all, is the vijnana kanda. And vijnana is just awareness, usually translated as consciousness, but we have to be very careful when we translate into English, because in English these terms can often have different kind of meanings, and consciousness can have different meanings, but it's like consciousness in the sense of awareness, in the sense of having the ability to know anything. Not knowing as in knowledge, but knowing as in the sense of being aware. I know this is happening, right? In that sense. And this is the most profound sense of self that we have. So this is the vijnana kanda. And all of these things, all of these five things I've been talking about, you can experience them right now. Right now there's form. Form can also be external form. You see the forms of other, or you see yourself. This is my form. This is my appearance. There is a feeling. Either you are enjoying yourself, you have sukha. You are not enjoying yourself, you have dukkha, or you're falling asleep. You have adukkama sukha. Maybe not. Maybe falling asleep is happy for you. Yes, maybe it's sukha. I don't know. It depends on the situation. Or there is a perception right now. This is the understanding what I'm saying. There is volition right now. The volition is the paying attention. Whatever it is that you're paying attention to right now, That is the will. You are directing your mind in a certain direction. You may not even be aware that you are doing that, because sometimes it is more or less automatic, but nevertheless there is a will underlying what you're doing. And then there is your ability to just be aware, the fact that you are here, the fact that you know what's going on, that is vijnana. So you can actually experience the 5 khandhas right here and right now. So, what has all of this got to do with the Anapanasati Sutta? And what it has to do with the Anapanasati Sutta is that when we practice the mindfulness of breathing, what we are experiencing through that process that we have been talking about is always the Pancha Khandha. That is what you are experiencing. From the very beginning, when you start watching the breath, that watching the breath is Pancha Khandha. There is the perception of breath, that is the sanya. There is a perception of form, perhaps you're feeling your body a little bit, that can be considered form sometimes, or is it just Vedana? It depends on how you think about it. So if your eyes are still open, then you can certainly have a degree of form there, but form kind of fades away fairly quickly in this process. Then there is the feeling, you are enjoying it or not enjoying it. The feeling is there. There is the volition, the will. There is maybe a direction of the mind onto the breath. And there is the general awareness of the breath, consciousness. So the 5 khandhas are there when you are watching the breath. And so what we are really observing, ultimately, is the 5 khandhas. That's what we are observing. And then as you go through the process, as you go through these 12 steps, the 5 khandhas are changing. In fact, this whole point of the Anapanasati is to make the 5 khandhas change in a particular way. Not random change, but a particular kind of change. That is kind of what the mindfulness of breathing is about. We want to engender, we want to create a particular kind of change in the 5 khandhas. And the particular kind of change that we want to create is a gradual abandoning, a gradual letting go, a gradual deepening of the experience. So we are getting more and more refined aspects of the 5 khandhas. And this is what this process is about. So it is a gradual abandoning, a gradual letting go. And that is why we are contemplating, once the process is finished, once we come to the end, that is why we are contemplating impermanence, fading away, and cessation, because we're contemplating that change that is happening as we do the mindfulness of breathing. We are looking back on that process. Now we can contemplate it. Now we can think about what it actually meant. Now this is very interesting from many points of view. But the first thing maybe I should point out is that you can do the anicca-nupassana, the viraga-nupassana, you can do these things without doing all the 12 steps first. You don't have to go all the way to the end. Let's say you come to step number 6. You are doing the sukha patisangvedi, the experiencing sukha. Or maybe, whatever, maybe step number 9, chitta patisangvedi, or whatever it is. Whatever depth of meditation you have, assuming it is at least a little bit deep, you can contemplate, look back on the process, and you can contemplate what happened. You don't have to go all the way to step number 12, otherwise you will never start contemplating because it takes too long to get there. So that's the first thing to say. You can always do a bit of contemplation, and this is why I recommend you after every meditation to contemplate a little bit. Why are you experiencing a little bit of happiness? Why are you a little bit content? What is it that is so beautiful about meditation? Or what is it about, what is so miserable today about my meditation? Some days it's miserable, some days it's happy, sometimes it's just neutral. Why are these things happening? And then you start to uncover what is really dukkha and what is really sukha in life. You start to understand what is really worthwhile pursuing and what is not. You start to understand your own human condition as you do this. So this is the first thing. Always contemplate after your meditation, at least for a few moments, even if it's just 10 seconds, to try to understand the process. The second thing that is really interesting about this, and which makes the Buddha's teaching slightly different from what you often hear of the teachings elsewhere. And that is that the contemplation happens at the end, after you come out of meditation, not during meditation itself. What is very common is the idea that you sit and you meditate and you contemplate the experiences as they happen. But that is not usually how the Buddha talks about these things. Usually the Buddha will talk about, and he does that right here, about contemplation afterwards. You reflect back on what was happening. And if you think about it, even if you contemplate things right away while they're happening, it is still happening afterwards. Because the experience is first, then the contemplation happens the moment after. So regardless whether you are contemplating things as they're happening or after meditation, regardless, it is after the event. It has to be after the event, because contemplation must always happen after the thing happens. And there is a nice sutta in the Pottapada Sutta. They talk about this. They ask, what comes first, knowledge or perception? What is first, perception or knowledge? And perception is always first, and knowledge afterwards. You perceive something, then the knowledge arises. You have an experience, then you contemplate it. So the difference is only that in some ideas of contemplation, you contemplate it straight away as it is happening. But here the Buddha is saying, first come to the end of the meditation, then you contemplate, or make that the continuation of the meditation, if you like, at the very end. And that is, I think, a very important point that is sometimes underestimated. Because if you contemplate things straight away, it means that sometimes you don't allow the mind to reach a profound state of meditation first. And if you don't allow the mind to reach a profound state, it means that the data you have to contemplate are very weak. You want strong, powerful data. The more peaceful your mind is, the more bliss you have, the more things you have given up, the more powerful is going to be the contemplation that you have afterwards. So, how does this work in practice? And the way it works, right, is that the form khandha, for example, as you go this process, let's now say that the form khandha here refers to the body, your experience of the body. Maybe you still have a feeling that the body has a certain shape, even if it's just an imagination, you may not be seeing it, but you can feel the body is kind of there. And then as you go through the various steps of Anapanasati, the body, including the breath itself, changes. First of all, you notice the changes, breath going in and out, of the body, feeling the body, not feeling the body, kind of coming back and forth a little bit. And so, first of all, there is anicca. And then, as the meditation deepens, as you become more peaceful, the breath itself starts to become more refined, more subtle. And eventually, the breath itself, when you come into the deeper stage of this, it disappears. Sometimes it disappears for long periods. Or sometimes it's just very, very weak in the background somewhere. Especially when you come to, when the piti becomes very strong, and when you come to these lights in the mind, then the breath becomes very, very weak, almost like fading away completely. So you see the breath, the rupa, the body, all of these things fading, until eventually they cease completely. And the final cessation of the body happens when you at the very last step, vimochayang chittang, because one of the things the mind is liberated from at that point is the body, is the five senses, is the breath itself. All of that disappears. So you see the various degrees of impermanence, and the deeper that impermanence is, the more powerful is going to be your contemplation afterwards. So you see impermanence. And because you see the impermanence and you see the things fading away, you think, wow, actually, this is really beautiful. I don't want to have anything to do with this blooming body anymore. Get rid of the body. The body is just painful and problematic. So you understand dukkha and you understand sukha at the same time. Anicca nupassana leads to understanding of dukkha as well. And then when the body eventually completely disappears, and you have no access to it anymore, you also understand anatta, Because not having access to something, not being able to bring it to mind, because it is completely gone, means it is non-self. So you understand the non-self nature of the body. And this is where the body becomes really uninteresting. If it has nothing to do with you, why are you concerned about it? And that ultimately, down the track, if you keep on contemplating in this way, ultimately it leads to patinissagga. Patinissagga is the letting go, where you don't crave for it anymore. All desire for the body is ultimately gone. And this is similar to the idea that you find in someone yesterday mentioned the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, the analysis of the four elements. And that is similar kind of thing, because in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, you analyze the four elements of the body. You come to the point where it is not me, not mine, not the self. That is how you're supposed to analyze them that far. And when you see the four elements as not self, that is when it says you have nibbida, you nibbindati, those elements. And because you nibbida, you virajeti. Virajeti is like you let them go. You don't have any interest in them anymore. That is the same process that you see in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta. In the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, it is not so obvious. There, the main idea seems to be that you contemplate the four elements. But even there, it is not exclusive. It just says that this is your meditation object, but it may very well involve other parts of the path as well. It doesn't say that it does not include mindfulness of breathing. Mindfulness of breathing may also be included there as well. But a similar kind of thing, a process that you see happening here. And so that is the most basic one, is the idea of the rupa khandha. And then you have the same thing with the feelings. When you start out your meditation, you may have all kinds of feelings because the body is full of bad feelings. Somewhere in the Suttas, the Buddha says that this body is an abyss. An abyss is like an abyss is like this kind of vertical thing that goes down forever. It's kind of the abyss, and it is an abyss of painful feelings, says the Buddha, and that's kind of really powerful. There's no end to painful feelings in this body. It is a real nuisance, and that's why we move all the time, we shift all the time, because the body is never really comfortable. And so getting rid of the body is a great benefit in meditation. And the idea of always making the body comfortable, it is never going to work because it is impossible. The only way to do it is to do it through meditation practice. So we start off with all the feelings in the body, and then as things calm down, as things become peaceful, those bad feelings in the body, they start to fade away. The bad mental feelings, whatever you may have, negative feelings in the mind or whatever it is, they also start to fade away. And especially when you come to the piti, the experience of piti and sukha, they are basically, you don't hardly feel any negative feelings anymore. Certainly the mind now doesn't have any negative feelings. Maybe sometimes the body can kind of get through, but the body also tends to not have any bad feelings anymore at this point. And so you can see that you are moving, the feelings are changing. You're moving away, first of all, losing all the pain, losing all the dukkha. Then you are moving on to the pleasant feeling. The sukha is coming into focus. And then the sukha changes. The sukha becomes more and more refined. First of all, you have pamojja, then you have piti, then you have sukha, and in between you have passaddhi. Passaddhi is also just a kind of beautiful feeling. And the beauty and the happiness becomes more and more refined, more and more subtle, more and more powerful. You see the change, the profundity of happiness as you go through this process. And ultimately, you may come to the adukkhama sukha, which is often very closely related to the idea of upekkha, the equanimity. But that is often very, very long way down the track when you come into the jhana states. You see this process. You see the impermanence of feeling here. And when you contemplate that, well, first of all, you can see, you start to understand the problem of dukkha vedana, how pervasive it is, how it is always present. You start to understand the problem of sukha vedana, because you start to realize that even sukha vedana comes in this large variety of degrees. And some of the more coarser forms of sukha vedana, they're not really all that happy compared to the more powerful and profound aspects of sukha that are really worthwhile. So you start to understand that even sukha vedana is useful to give up, at least the preliminary stages. If you get into the jhana states, then the ordinary piti doesn't seem very interesting anymore, because it seems quite coarse. If you get into the third jhana, the first jhana is not going to be interesting anymore, because it's more profound. And if you get to adukkama sukha, neither happiness nor pain, well then all happiness is not going to seem interesting anymore. And the moment all happiness and all suffering is not interesting because it is impermanent, because it is a kind of dukkha, kind of unsatisfactoriness, and also it is non-self because you can give it up completely, then you are almost out of samsara, because it is happiness and pain that largely drives us in our samsaric existence. So if you understand that these things are not worthwhile, that means that you are almost on the way out. So this is the contemplation of Vedana through the process of Anapanasati. I took it a very long way there, maybe a little bit too long, but you get the idea. You see the changeability. You see the viraga, the fading away of certain feelings. You see the cessation of certain feelings, and you see it directly in your personal experience. And every one of you here will have had some of those experiences already, because this is what meditation is about. Get a little bit of peace, already you know some of this straight away. Then we have the idea of perception. And your perceptions are changing continuously as you are going through this process. The perception here is whatever you are aware of. And so the breath is becoming more and more subtle. The breath is disappearing. The 5 senses, this is a kind of a very obvious perception. The 5 senses are fading away. You can see how you are becoming more and more, you're going within yourself more and more. You're experiencing your inner world more. This is what experiencing joy is about. You're withdrawing into yourself. You're finding your real home, which is within. And you're letting go of the 5 senses as a consequence. So you see the fading away of the 5 senses, which includes the body, which includes all of these things. And this is a perception. Your perception of the world, your perception of everything is changing. And you start to see how certain perceptions are problematic. When they fade away, you become more happy as a consequence. When they disappear, you feel better about yourself. So you understand which perceptions are worthwhile. The inner perceptions are really worthwhile. The perceptions of bliss and happiness are really worthwhile. And then things disappear, become more and more simple. The simple perceptions are the most powerful one. The simpler, the more profound your perception is, the more useful it is. You allow things to fade away. You see the dukkha of the coarser perceptions. And ultimately you see also that they are non-self, because you can let go of them. And when they disappear, good riddance. You're happy that they are gone. And this is kind of how this works. And then ultimately, you may, if you enter into a deep state of samadhi, you enter a completely different perceptual world. It's like one world is let go of. This is the kama loka is gone, and you enter like the rupa loka instead. So like there's a shift in your perception, and the whole perceptual reality of the kama loka is gone, and you enter a different reality. Perceptions, anicca, changing. You will notice this as you do it. Changing, then fading away, viraga, and eventually certain perceptions ceasing completely. You no longer have any access to it. You understand it is non-self. A very important part of the process of meditation is the contemplation of the sankharas. And as I mentioned before, the sankharas are basically the movement of the mind, is all the doing activity. And the way that you know that in your perception, in your experience, is that you see the movement. As long as there is movement going on, you know that the sankharas are present. You can see that the feelings are changing. You can see that the perception that you're looking at, there's movement in your perception. Even when you come to the very profound stages we've been talking about here, where you see the light in the mind, you can see the movement of that light in the mind. It is not completely still, for example. This is the sankhara, this is the movement, the creative force, the will inside moving things. And so one of the qualities that I mentioned yesterday that you see in the Anapanasati Sutta is this continuation of stilling. First of all, you're stilling the kaya sankhara. Yeah, this is the activity of the body, or the physical process, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, the breath, all of these things. Then you are stilling the mind. This is in step number 8. Chitta sankarang pasambati. Yeah? So you're stilling the mind. In other words, all the mental qualities, the perceptions, the feelings are becoming more peaceful. There's less movement going on. Stilling, 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 stilling. And as you are stilling, what you are doing is that the sankharas are gradually fading away. You are doing less. This is what the fading away of the sankharas feel like in your experience. You're becoming more peaceful. And you will see very clearly that you are actually also doing less. You're not using your mind. You're not holding on to anything. You're not trying to achieve anything. In fact, this process happens precisely because you are not trying, because you are kind of standing back and you are identifying with the observer rather than identifying with the doer. One of the biggest problems during this process is this identity with the doing. Because we identify with the doer, it is hard to let go. This is why we cannot really let go very often. We are the doer. And by letting go of the doer, it feels like you are letting go of yourself. Yeah? And this is hard because this is me. And because it's yours, if someone takes what is yours, these are my glasses. Don't take my glasses. Yeah, are they my glasses? Maybe not. Maybe they belong to nature. That doesn't mean you can take them, right? Just to be clear. And of course the glasses is nothing. These are the small little things, but when it comes to the will, it is a very integral part to what we take to be ourselves. And that is why it is so hard to give up, because it feels like you are disappearing. What is happening to me? I am disappearing. Okay, I don't want to disappear. And then you do something just to feel that you are still there. Yeah, you cannot stop yourself from doing things. And this is what makes this letting go process so difficult. And that is why it is so important that you observe this process and you understand how letting go of the doing actually is something very delightful. It is very beautiful when this happens. It is very enjoyable. It is far better not to be the doer than to be the doer. And so this is why this contemplation is useful again, because it reminds you where real happiness is to be found. It enables you to let go of the doer again in the future when you understand this. And this is also why when you meditate, if the mind is active, you are thinking about things. I suggested on the very first session on Friday, I suggested to identify more with the knowing and just see like the thoughts. The thoughts become like the object of awareness, but you are the knower who knows the thoughts. And the more you identify with the knowing, the more you are able to objectify the doing, to make the doing just look like something that is passing through you. It is not really part of you, it's just this thing that arises and kind of passes away, whereas you are standing back, knowing everything. So one way of thinking about the Buddhist path is a kind of refinement of the sense of self. Very often in ordinary life we have a very coarse sense of self. Our sense of self relates to the physical body. Our sense of self relates to our stupid belongings, little things that we have. Don't take this, don't take it's mine, That is kind of the sense of self expressing itself, but in a very coarse way. So one of the beautiful things about becoming a monastic is that you are giving up. You are no longer identifying so much with your belongings because you have much fewer belongings. And that's why I also recommend, like you were saying yesterday about having a bank account, I'd recommend not having a feeling that you are in charge of money, because the more you have that sense, the more you have the sense of self relating to the coarse things in the world. It is beautiful to give up money. It is beautiful to give up this feeling of controlling the five sense world. Get into that. And then, as you go through this process, you are giving up more and more things that you think are yours. You're giving up the body. You're gradually giving up the five senses to some extent. You're giving up certain perceptions. Who are you as a person? Are you Sri Lankan? Are you Australian? Are you Canadian? Are you Norwegian? Are you Danish? Maybe all of these things are just labels. Who cares what we are? It's kind of irrelevant. We are human beings. Actually, are we a human being? That's the next question. What does it mean to be human, right? If you go into your mind, kind of your humanity starts to disappear. And so we let go of more of these labels. And as we go within, we start to identify instead with the knowing, with the beautiful states of mind, with the beautiful happiness that you feel within. You identify with more refined things. You are letting go of the coarse aspect of the sense of self. And this is one way of thinking about this path. And the more of the coarse aspects of the sense of self that you let go of, the more refined it becomes, the less is the grasping, the less is the holding on. So actually, it has a positive effect, just that thing. It doesn't mean that it's not the same to hold on to something refined as it is to hold on to something coarse. It is much better to hold on to the refined things. And then when you hold on to the refined things, that is where eventually you can find the completely release from all kinds of holding on at all. So you reduce the sankharas, you reduce the holding on. It becomes more and more refined as you go through this process. And of course, you know where this ends. It ends with samadhi. Samadhi, the jhana states, the vimochayang chittang, the 12th step in the Anapanasati, is where you let go of all kinds of doing, all kinds of will, all kinds of holding on. And the mind kind of gets locked into samadhi, where there is no movement. There's a little bit of movement in the first jhana, but in the second jhana, avitaka, avichara, no vitaka, no vichara, it means the mind is samadhija. It is born, the state born of samadhi. It is a completely unified state of mind where there's no movement anymore. All sankharas are gone. And of course, once all sankharas are gone, this leads to very, very profound states of insight. This is where you know that you are not your will. The will, in fact, is dukkha. You understand that the will is a problem. It leads to all kinds of problems. Just the very fact of using the will, that very fact is dukkha. That's what you understand. The will that you took to be yours, the will that you took to be so profound and important because you use it to create things in the world, you use it to make the world a better place or whatever. All of that, now you understand for the first time, is problematic. It is dukkha, it is non-self. The will has passed away. The will has nirodha. It is the complete anicca of the will. So this is where it starts to get really, really profound. But you will start to understand this. Even if you get a little bit peaceful, you start to understand where this is heading and why it is such a beautiful thing. And then you have the last one. The last one is the vijnana itself. So this is the knowing. This is the most profound of all of these things. And you will see, of course, as you go through this process, that your field of awareness is gradually becoming less and less. And by field of awareness, I mean the number of things that you can be aware of are reducing. So your consciousness is becoming more and more refined. And one of the important things that you are becoming less aware of is the five senses. And ultimately, as you go through this process, you are giving up the five senses. And that means a very, very large part of your vijnana is also disappearing. Viraga, ultimately nirodha, when you come to the jhana states. And that is, again, very profound because you understand that things that you thought were an intrinsic part to your knowing, a fundamental aspect of your very being as a person, they can also disappear. You are not the knowing of the five senses. And then you come back to the mind. And then you start giving up the mind, and consciousness is actually reduced further. And in this way, you can see the impermanence of consciousness. You can start to understand why knowing itself is a problem, why it is dukkha, and why ultimately it is non-self. Why? Because you can give it up stage by stage. So this is the idea of using the process of Anapanasati for insight. Going back to the process itself, looking at your experience, seeing how things are changeable, how they gradually fade away, and ultimately how they disappear completely. So at the end of every meditation you have, take a little bit of time to contemplate, understand the process, understand how it is that these beautiful qualities arise. This is where we come back again to the Dhamma Nupassana of the Satipatthana Sutta. You understand how it is that the hindrances fade away, how they disappear. You understand how the bojjhangas come into existence and how they disappear. Yeah, this is part of the contemplation. And then you also add in the contemplation of the five khandhas themselves, how they arise, how they disappear. And you start to understand this idea of the tilakkhana. You start to understand what is real happiness in the world, what is real suffering here, what can be taken as why certain things should never be taken as a self, and then what maybe remains after that. So that is, I don't think I even read out the last paragraph. Let me read it out just to kind of do my job, otherwise I'm not doing my job. So this is how the Buddha phrases this. They practice like this. I will breathe in, observing impermanence, anicca. They practice like this. I will breathe out, observing impermanence. They practice like this. I will breathe in, observe fading away, viraga. They practice like this. I will breathe out, observing fading away. They practice like this. I will breathe in, observing cessation, nirodha, or ending, if you like. They practice like this. I will breathe out, observing cessation. They practice like this. I will breathe in, observing letting go, patinissagga. They practice like this. I will breathe out, observing letting go. And of course, letting go is what ultimately takes you all the way to arahantship. And this is why the Anapanasati Sutta takes you all the way to Vijja Vimutti, because that is where this last factor here actually leads you. And then the Buddha says, mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated in this way, is very fruitful and beneficial. So there you are. That is the powerful Anapanasati Sutta. I know that some of you also would like to hear about metta meditation, but I think Anapanasati is probably the most fundamental meditation practice in the suttas, and that's why I put so much emphasis on it. And we will carry on, and we will get around to thinking a bit about metta and all of these kind of things later on. But I think it's very useful to have considered this in quite a bit of detail. So I hope you will forgive me if you feel that I have gone on for too long about this. But I'm sure you have it in your heart to let go of that as well. So that is all for this morning. So please keep on enjoying yourself. And we have some more interviews and things. And have a nice lunch. And we'll see you back here in the hall again at 4 o'clock this afternoon.